How can we be holy? In Judaism, to be holy centers on love. At the center of the Torah, we find a passage, the Holiness Code, that shows us a myriad of ways we can choose to live a holy life. At the center of the Holiness Code is the mitzvah, love your fellow as yourself. Va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. As the iconic sage Rabbi Akiva of the 2nd century land of Israel said in the Talmud, love your fellow as yourself. This is the great principle of the Torah. The most important work we can do in this new year is to love each other more. The Holiness Code can show us the nuances and the full depth of what it means to love. Parts of the Holiness Code are traditionally read on Yom Kippur afternoon. Our ancestors felt these words from the Torah offer us wisdom for the questions we ask on this holiest day. Above all, this compact, reverberant blast of words, love your fellow as yourself, like the shofar blast that ends Yom Kippur, can guide us when we come through the gates of atonement into our paths of the new year. We find the Holiness Code at the heart of the Torah's 3rd book, Vayikra, Leviticus. At this point, Moses, has come down the mountain with the 10 Commandments to the people's base camp at the foot of Mount Sinai. Yet Moshe and the people still have so much to learn about how to make holy choices and establish a holy society. Each day, Moshe goes into the people's cherished portable sanctuary in the wilderness to listen for guidance from the voice of Adonai, the Eternal One, according to what this means for each of us. God charges Moshe, speak to all the community of the children of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Eternal One, your God, am holy. God reveals to Moshe essential duties, what we now call the Holiness Code, about how to fulfill this great charge. Let's explore this mitzvah at the heart of the Holiness Code, love your fellow as yourself, word by word. What can these words teach us about love? In the original Hebrew, this phrase is 3 words, va'ahavta, and you shall love, l'reacha, your fellow, kamocha, as yourself. Let's start with ve'ahavta, you shall love. With a twist, the Torah shows us a deep truth about what it means to love each other by first telling us what not to do. God says, you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely tell the person what is wrong. You shall not take revenge, and you shall not bear a grudge. Only after this list of things we should not do, God gives us the great mitzvah we should do, love your fellow as yourself. We might have thought a commandment to love would come with many details about the nature of love. Instead, in the Torah, love speaks for itself. Love is self-evident. We already know what love is, the Torah is saying. We have innate well springs of love for each other. The hard part is what gets in the way of showing love for each other. Lack of communication, grudges, vengefulness, and hate. If we can dispel these things, we will find the well springs of love in us, perhaps more than we know. How do we dispel these things? We find a potent insight in the Hebrew word for bear a grudge. This verb, titor, literally means guard. The Bible uses it to describe the guards or watchmen of vineyards who protect against thieves and wild animals. With this poetic imagery, the Torah is calling us not to be watchmen for our own grudges, police officers patrolling the borders of our own hearts to keep our grudges secure. Our tradition calls us not to hold on to grudges to feel self-righteous or to insist that the situation cannot be made better. Guarding our grudges hurts others, and it drains our own energy and spirit. How do we respond, though, when we feel genuine pain because someone has treated us wrongly? The prior mitzvah in the Holiness Code shows us, you shall surely tell the person what is wrong. We communicate with each other. We have a right, in fact a duty, to talk with someone about how they treated us and how it made us feel. Then they can apologize. They may share things for which we can apologize. Then we can all begin to heal, forgive each other, and start anew. No one tool can address all situations. Sometimes, for example, the other person may not be open to talking honestly about what has gone wrong. The Torah is saying that when we endeavor to communicate, we can find the affirmation of knowing we have responded to this moment the best we can. And by prompting us to communicate, the Torah is suggesting we may be surprised by what can be repaired. We see one more piece of wisdom in the Hebrew verb to tell someone what is wrong, tochiach. The prophets use this same word root in two different ways, both when God tells the people that our poor choices have led to difficult consequences, and the very same word root when God tells us that through listening and changing how we act, we can find a new beginning. By using the same word for both situations, for talking honestly about wrongs and repairing them, Judaism shows us that sometimes the two can be one. Reaching out honestly to someone about what is wrong can create an opportunity to make things right. Communicating holds the promise that we can forgive each other and heal, and love can be restored. Let's turn from ve'ahavta, you shall love, to the word fellow, re'ah. When the Torah calls us to love our fellow, what is truly being asked of us? The Hebrew word re'ah is often translated in English as neighbor, but re'ah does not mean the person who lives next to you. It means your fellow other person. We find this word, for example, in the story of Jonah, also traditionally read on Yom Kippur afternoon. When Jonah is on a ship in a torrential storm, this word, re'ah, describes the fellow shipmates. When the shipmates frantically plan how to stay safe in the storm, the text says, and they spoke each one to their fellow. This is what it is to be fellows, far deeper and more expansive than being physical next to our neighbors. To be fellows is to be shipmates on the same ship and to face the same storms. The text tells us that those on board come from different lands and peoples. The reason they take care of each other is not because of a shared background, but because they owe each other help and care, and they know their own survival depends on the whole ship's faring well. Across all lines of physical neighbors and neighborhoods, we are all each other's fellows. What it means to love our fellow is to care about a person because their well-being and dignity matter as much as our own, and to know that we as a society are indeed all in the same boat. Our welfare sinks or sails as one. We find this universal sense of love for our fellow in the wisdom of the classic Torah commentator Rabbi Abraham ibn Ezra of the golden age of Muslim Spain in the 12th century. In the Torah text, immediately after we read, love your fellow as yourself, surprisingly, the next phrase is, I am the eternal one, Ani Adonai. Why add this phrase, I am the eternal one? Ibn Ezra answered that this phrase reminds us that I, one God alone, created all of you. What underlies love for our fellow is that they too are like us, a fellow creation of God. We are all equal, and we all come from the same source. For Ibn Ezra, living in pre-Inquisition Spain, in an era of harmony, peace, and cross-cultural flourishing among Muslims, Christians, and Jews, each day he walked amid proof of the promise of human universalism. The modern Torah commentator Tamara Khan Eskenazi of the LA campus of Hebrew Union College, the seminary where all our clergy were ordained, describes the way that genuine care can transform our lives and society. She writes that in the Holiness Code, holiness comes from cultivating relationships. Connections define the holy community. There is such a thing as connecting with one's fellow human being beyond our family simply because they are our fellow human being. This is what God asks of us. There is a human tendency to show love only to people like ourselves. We might even make the mistake of misinterpreting fellow to mean people like us and say this is all the Torah asks of us. The Torah anticipated this risk. In the Holiness Code, after Moshe hears the words from God, love your fellow as yourself, a few verses later, we find the ultimate counterpart to love your fellow, the mitzvah to love the stranger. The text says, the stranger who resides among you shall be to you like the native born among you, and you shall love him as yourself. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Love your fellow and love the stranger. Surely the point of combining these two phrases in the Holiness Code is to say, love everybody. By invoking the way we were treated in Egypt, the Torah also shows us that the mitzvah to love the stranger applies both in our personal lives and in the public square, including in how we use power. In fact, the best translation of the Hebrew word usually translated as stranger would be migrant. This Hebrew word, ger, comes from the root to reside, like resident alien in modern English. It indicates someone from another land, people, and faith who has come to reside among us. The Torah calls us to love migrants because we were migrants once. When we see those who we might think of as most foreign, the Torah points us to our people's memories, shows us ourselves in their faces, and calls us to give them the love we wish we had received. There is nothing more urgent and indeed more holy that we can do in the new year than to love each other more. Love for each other is what we need like water in the desert. This Spirit is calling to us from all these texts and stories, across all these moments in Jewish history. From Moshe listening for God's voice in the wilderness and remembering how we were treated in Egypt, to the shipmates in the storm in the story of Yonah, from Rabbi Akiva in the Talmudic house of study, to Ibn Ezra in the golden age of Muslim Spain. To this day, in modern Israel, you can see bumper stickers that say, love your fellow as yourself. Or on buses, the variant, love your bus driver as yourself. The celebrated Israeli singer-songwriter Meir Ariel ended one of his final concerts in 1999 in Tel Aviv with the words, "The people of Israel lives, love your fellow as yourself. Am Yisrael chai, va'ahavta l'reacha kamocha." We need not wait a moment to live out this call, to share an extra kind word or bite our tongue when we feel impatient with our families, an Uber driver or a checkout clerk, our friends, or indeed a bus driver or a fellow concert goer. We need not wait to talk to someone who is standing alone at a party, to do our share toward a society that shows love to migrants, or to talk with someone we love about what is wrong and make things right. The Torah uses the word ve'ahavta, and you shall love, to describe three kinds of relationships: love for our fellow, love for the stranger, and finally, love for Adonai, the Eternal One. Va'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, you shall love the Eternal One, your God. The Torah suggests that when we fulfill the first two, love for fellow and stranger, the third, love for the Eternal One, is present. We have the chance to show each other genuine respect and love as fellow human beings, not as objects, to relate to each other not as I and it, but as I and you, as the modern Jewish philosopher Martin Buber envisioned in his classic book, I and Thou. Then we find in Buber's words that in every you, we address the eternal you. We perceive a breath of it. May we make the kinds of choices that fulfill the great mitzvah to love our fellow as ourselves. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. When we do, may we fill this world with the divine presence. Gemar chatima tova. May you be sealed well in the book of life, L'chaim tovim u'l'shalom, for good life and for peace.
How would the world look? How might our days be lighter? How could the heart feel? How might the lands get wider if we loved like that? Really loved like that. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, l'reacha kamocha, kamocha. Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, l'reacha kamocha. Who could be saved? How might the world be softer? Who could your heart heal? What is the gift you'd offer if we loved like that? Really loved like that.